All right, we are live. I'm Douglas, as usual, and today I have with me Trace Wax. Welcome, Trace. It's good to have you.
Good to be here. Good morning. Pleasure to have coffee with you.
Oh, yes, for sure, for sure. Well, let's get started. I know that we both share a common history, through just getting started as engineers, developers, and certainly an affinity, love for design sprints. And it seems like we both caught on to that pretty early and got into it and started doing it. And we both kind of evolved from that. Still, I think you still do. I'm pretty sure you still do design sprints. We still do quite a few of them, and
Oh,
um,
100%.
yeah, yeah, and but also do quite a few other things too. So that's quite common. So I wanted to dig into a little bit of that, and maybe talk a little bit about, I don't know, what first caught your eye and where you thought the potential was in working in that way, and then kind of what it's kind of created for you now as you kind of think about the journey from then to now, because it's been a little while. So I guess for me it was, the just following the blog posts and just the stuff, that the conversations that were happening, and then Google Ventures invested in my company, so I got to like meet Jake.
That'll do it.
So it was like I had a first row seat to the revolution, as they say. But so I'm kind of curious, like what was your experience there, and what really caught your eye?
Well, with design sprints in particular, it just seemed like such a good way to figure out what, just to validate your software before you built it.
Mm,
Like as an engineer, when I was first, learning to code, I'd hack on anything just to develop my chops. But ultimately, I wanted to make sure that I was building stuff that mattered. Like, I'd end up in, like a bloated code base of a whole bunch of things that nobody was ever using, you had to
mm,
maintain. And the easiest code to write and maintain is no code. So when I saw the possibility to validate things earlier, it really struck a chord with me, because I'd spent, in my very first startup, we spent 3 years. We probably could have killed it after one. We had 1,000 enthusiastic users and couldn't grow it. And we weren't building something that mattered. And I wanted, to spend my time better as an engineer. And I wanted every engineer everywhere to, write code that mattered and was used, and to get rid of that, those half
mm.
of features that don't matter and can bloat a code base, and have something that was really clean, that was getting used all the time.
Yeah, that's kind of a double whammy. It's like the bloat can create, stuff you have to maintain, because other features now have to kind of um, maybe just account for that stuff that's happening and work around it and with it and consider it. And then also it's just more stuff to test, more stuff that it's just more quantity to deal with.
Yeah, and then your test suites can get really slow.
Yeah.
And we got to a point, where, then there are all these, services coming online where you could, run parallel testing in the cloud. And even then, your test suites are taking 15 minutes. And, meanwhile, then you just completely lose the flow of the cadence of test-driven development as an engineer. So, I really joined the design sprint movement, to have a seat to have engineering have a seat at the table, to communicate what things are easy and hard to build. And you're just constantly making micro decisions as an engineer about like how you want to implement something or what the API is going to be. And if you
Mm.
really understand the purpose behind anything, those just become effortless. And if you don't have that context, you just don't have a clue.
Yeah, I kind of got curious there. So, as you were speaking, I started to think about, DevOps and, site reliability engineering, and
Mhm.
the various different functions and roles that have kind of evolved over the years. And
Those are fun for design sprints. Like,
yeah,
well, I found myself really kind of getting into that world. You're doing a design sprint where the prototype is just a bunch of scripts that you can run.
Yeah.
And configuring something as a platform from scratch, like that, because once you start getting kind of deep into the back end, or AI and ML, or DevOps, you're getting really far from these principles of lean product. But that's kind of the foundation, and often that's where you need it most. If you can really understand the needs of an engineering team as your users, there's a really fertile ground there. And that's I think struck a chord with a lot of teams. And I find myself doing design sprints for SRE teams. That's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it reminds me of this idea around just anything can be a prototype. And if we approach that prototyping mindset, it can open up so much possibility around all areas of business, all areas of life, And I love that you are using it to prototype DevOps. Even test-driven development is a prototyping mindset, right? Like we're going to take a step. We're going to take a step back, and before we build it, we're going to kind of model it, right? We're going to understand it and make sure it's right. And
That's your prototype of your code, and especially like I would always kind of lean into user facing kind of integration testing, where you're effectively kind of writing a script of what's going to happen. And so the test effectively is a prototype of the code before you use it. And I think that there's this real kind of gap between, like, there's a lot of, you can get really far with workshops and design thinking, and with the design sprint book and design sprints in general. It's been really kind of important for me in my career. But often what we would see is we'd do a design sprint, we'd kind of get some validation of something that we thought we knew anyway, and then enter a 3 or more month build cycle, and then still end up building a whole bunch of stuff that didn't matter. So been a real fan of, like, even when the design sprint gives you that initial validation, when you're showing people and doing solution interviews, that's great. But you really need to be putting something out there that's going to solve some real initial problems, even before something's perfect and tested. Get that out there, validate it, throw it away, and then you can do your test-driven development and build something really solid you can build on for the future.
Yeah. So I think there's, like, it's almost like nested level. It's like fractaling, right? It's like,
oh yeah, totally.
That
was the former name of our company. Like our company now is Ardium. Like Fractal turned out the trademarks were owned all the way down. The ownership of the Fractal name was Fractal, but
right.
Harvard, and we formed Ardium to have a better way of building software that was going to be more impactful, and seeing so many software teams gummed up because the business and engineering weren't aligned. And I really see the role of product as being able to help engineers live their best lives and build their best software, because we've been able to pull from the business and the market and all the teams exactly what you need to make.
Yeah, absolutely. So it sounds like also, this has kind of evolved over time, and a lot of focus currently on the human elements, it sounds like, and also it sounds like more kind of I would say higher level scope, like things that are more overarching, like road mapping or portfolio management, that sort of thing. So
yeah, 100%. Like, the business, especially as kind of company scales and the market matures and our craft matures, like being able to do lean product and have product and design and engineering in the business get along on the scope of a single project is becoming a really kind of well understood problem. And a lot of companies have a long way to go, but the way forward is clear, and it's a matter of just executing it and finding something that works well for you. And what's been really kind of confusing has been more at the kind of executive level, going in between teams, understanding how teams can interact, and busting down those silos, and just really understanding the vision of where your company and each product wants to go. So teams have the ability and the runway from the grassroots to do the right thing, because they each understand the vision well. And if you ask every member of that team, like, why they're doing what they're doing, what their vision is, they can recite it back to you word for word in a way that's really aligned, and you can tell kind of really speaks to them emotionally as humans.
So, what do you think gets in the way the most around this kind of alignment around the vision, and also maybe shared understanding of the vision?
Well, I mean, part of it is just it's all respect to all my friends at Nike. Shout out Greg Merrill. It's the Nike shoes method. You just do it. Like you need to kind of spend that time. Like, people are so busy in the weeds trying to make stuff that comes down from on high, that they're not really kind of connecting to that why, and asking people all the way up to prove it. So it comes down to that kind of change is hard. Cultural change is harder, and there are a lot of reasons, and people are really comfortable what they're doing, and in order for them to be successful and not be disrupted, they're kind of waking up and seeing, like, hey, if we don't find a better way of working, these upstarts are going to eat our lunch. Like, the entire fintech sector is taking a look at what Stripe's doing, and everything that's happening in the blockchain and the Web3 community. So I think people get really attached to their ideas, and they get angry when you take your toys away. When that person that back when we used to have lunch together, you could just go, your query is running slow, and you could just go, have lunch with, your friend, one of the engineers, and send them a message, and boom, your query sped up. But meanwhile, they spent an afternoon doing something that just helped you once, but wasn't helping the team do what mattered. To, really understand that, 2/3 of your effort needs to be spent doing things that, you've proven to yourself are going to advance your vision. And it's just something that you feel, and then you use those to make, tiny micro decisions, like, constantly, a dozen times a day, multiple times an hour. I could do this, or I could do that. Like, can be even like on the personal level. Well, should I put my contacts in or put my glasses in? Well, I don't really want to put my contacts in. That's a pain in the butt. New contact wearer, I hate putting contacts in. But I know, for example, because I've used these product techniques on my own life, and with so many of my friends, like, I know my vision is in part, being present. Like, I did this little workshop on myself with one of my friends, and saw that my own personal vision for my personal life as it relates to my career. I've always wanted to make entrepreneurial dreams come true, and I've always wanted to catalyze connection, presence, purpose, and play. So am I going to be able to do that more with my glasses or with my contacts? Well, I'll be more present in the world if I don't have these big frames on. All right, I'll put my contacts in.
So, one thing that jumped out to me was when you were talking about the query, the optimizing the query. And I think these are these micro moments in organizations that often go unnoticed, untracked, and unrealized. And when I'm coaching, I still from time to time will coach young startups, because I still enjoy being like, even like 5% CTO,
Yeah.
But so I see this all the time, where this kind of like these ad hoc requests aren't tracked. And so the phrase that popped into my head when you were saying that was, visualizing helps you get to your vision, which is kind of a hilarious thing to say. Word, but there's some truth in that, right? Because if we expose it, if we visualize it, if we track what's happening toward our vision, against our vision, and we get to a deeper understanding of that vision, then all those things will help us. But if we're not visualizing and tracking those things that are happening, then there's no way that we'll know, and if we're in pursuit of our vision or not.
And one of my favorite things to first talk about, like, you can, it's so easy to, I love, like, I'm just like a huge process nerd, and there's so, like, our toolbox 2020, almost two now, is just so huge and ever expanding. And it's just confusing. Like, you don't even know where to begin and what to use. But with the advent of kind of product ops coming in and being really intentional about process, your process really can protect you and help you be really intentional about these ad hoc requests. And Agile is all about, like, learning new things, and those are going to come in. You need to make sure that your team and its process has time to think about those. But even at the smallest teams, having some sort of intake process and cadence whereby these requests are considered, puts that space in there where you can breathe and you can think and you can really get curious, and you can evaluate this via your intake, and almost have, it's like having a a PMO of your small team. Like, all right, stuff's coming in. Each of these things, does it fit against the vision? Great. Well, no. All right. Well, maybe won't do that, or put that further down. And then, hey, there, Mr. and Ms. stakeholder, everywhere in between. There's something that you really want. Fine. Like, we used to set it up so that, we'd have like 3 themes a week that we work on. We'd get our roadmap out, we'd bust out our themes of the problems we're going to want to solve, and we'd put those into our rubric and say, all right, our rubric says, all right, these are the top 2 themes of the week. We're going to be hacking on that. But, there's also one thing that, the person who's writing the checks really wants and really needs, because it's otherwise going to come up their works. Great. We'll do that one thing, but we're still focusing 2/3 of the effort on what matters most. And that feels like a really good balance.
Yeah, for sure. I think the equilibrium and balance is important to get to, and it's not always clear. It's something I think even thinking about yesterday's weather or any of these techniques for like looking and reviewing velocity can be applied to all sorts of things. It doesn't have to be like how many story points we put into a sprint. It could just be as simple as like, what's our right mix? What's our right investment in this versus that? Or, how many people should be dedicated to this thing over time? Yeah, I think all that stuff should be tracked and thought about. Otherwise, it's so easy to slip out into the squeaky wheel gets the grease kind of mentalities.
Yeah, especially if you're working with a data team. Like, the data teams just keeps coming up. They've got such
Right.
ideas of what they want to make, and they're just like makers to the core, and they're like coming up with new things and new models. And when you show a data team a good rubric that's based on data, then that just lights them up and computes. And data can be qual or quant. So easy. Like, you get to your really early, your exploratory, it's qual only, and at some point you start to ship and you get this amazing quant data, and it's almost, you forget that qual exists. And so if you can kind of find that balance, you can really run so that you can help people see the data, but also tell the story of that one user that you've seen struggle, that one customer that doesn't understand why they're buying something, the one person who's been gifted a thing and they don't want to change what they're doing. They got work to do. So that right now, that's kind of developing a lot of maturity, and the tooling and the frameworks are getting really good. Again, kind of talking about portfolio management. You can just see almost kind of everything as a portfolio. You've got your a product can have a portfolio. You've got work streams. And you, even on the cadence of an individual sprint, where are you putting your effort? And then you've got all your teams, like, where are you putting your effort? I've been thinking about it a lot in the context of, we were talking about strengths a moment ago. Like, you can take a look at, if you do, say, a Clifton Strengths Finder, and you see kind of what you're good at, where do I want to put my strengths? Well, I've got my strength in influencing other people, but I got my strengths around learning and positivity and connection. I can focus my own energy as a human, managing my own portfolio of, I can convince people to do a thing, but also I can get kind of really curious about them, and through asking questions and being Socratic, like, come to something together that's beyond what you ever expected. So I just love how you can take all these techniques that began with this design sprint script that's super rigorous where you're kind of following instructions, and now kind of bust that open and see all these amazing tools you can assemble together into a way to get people to really feel their vision, their roadmap, and kind of the portfolio of their lives all the way up and down. And that's really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. As we close here, I want to come back to the strengths just 1 second because I think in addition to using your strengths as a way of thinking about where how you spend your time and how you manage your personal portfolio, even thinking about how you support the team or
Yeah.
whatnot. I think the strengths that are not expressed in your top 10 are great indicators as well because they can be good things to be aware of and avoid because they're going to be your energy zappers, right? And so I think that's something that a lot of people don't pay attention to because they might actually love something because they're just like infatuated with it or find it curious, but having that epiphany of like, wow, this is gonna like take a lot out of me because it's while it might be interesting to me, it's not one of my resonant strengths, and so maybe it's best if I let someone else do that.
Well, yeah, and so especially around that's where you become truly interdependent and aligned as
Mm,
a team.
yeah,
Strengths fitters all about again busting down those silos, knowing where to go from help, like what you have to contribute and what you need from other people. And they're going to light up when they get to play to their strengths. Like we've got a strengths employee resources group at RDM that's just we get to meet every couple weeks, and it's a joy and one of my favorite things to do. And we've
nice,
got our execs taking workshops and seeing like how their strengths as a founding and leadership team are really aligning. And as part of our resource group, we just kind of take a look at what we want to do, and we have our strengths up there front and center. We know that we've got someone on that team who's just really really good at organizing things and is also really strategic. And people say, oh, how have you been able to do so much in just a few months of meeting every couple of weeks for a few minutes? And it's just like we take a look at what needs to be done. We take a look at our strengths, and we each kind of divide and conquer and align and decide where to pair. And all of a sudden, all this stuff comes together, and then we can apply that on our teams when we're helping our clients, align product and make software.
amazing, I love it. Well, I think that brings us to the end of today's live stream. So, Trace, it was a pleasure chatting with you. I hope you have a amazing winter break. I know a lot of folks are shutting down, and we're going to be shut down for 2 weeks here pretty soon. So, I know a lot of people already started their holiday season. So, I know you were talking about traveling, and so awesome that everyone's hitting the reset button here. So, hopefully you get some good time to recharge and be with family, and we'll talk more soon.
Yeah, love that. And thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, me too.
Cheers.